Episode 26 is underway, and this is a special episode because we are quite literally breaking new ground. But before we get into this episode, if you want to be on an episode, you listening or watching, send me an email right here. If you're watching, if you're just listening, it's sttf.weareverywhere@gmail.com, or reach out to me on any of the socials, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff. Episode 26, we are breaking international ground. Our first guest that does not live in the United States of America. There are neighbors to the north. Mr. Scotty King. What's happening, man?
Hey, how you doing, Clay?
Good. Was that a good enough intro for you?
Yeah, really pumps up the international. Yeah,
Yeah.
Even though we could probably drive to each other's houses in about 3.5 hours.
Yeah,
but
I was about to say I'm basically in Canada. So.
Yeah, exactly. We like to lump in some of the border states as almost Canadians.
Yeah,
like we could annex Maine and no one would notice. We just kind of whoop. There's a whole big piece of Maine missing.
Yeah,
but
or even like the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
It's like, yeah, exactly. And there is so much kinship, between the border states and the border provinces. I mean, 70% of Canada's population lives a 2-hour drive from the American border. So there's your geography stat for the day. But
and what part of Canada are you in?
Yeah, so I'm currently in London, Ontario. It's where I've made my home. So I guess I'll be here for quite a while.
Born and raised, or
no, I was originally from a little town called Chesley, Ontario, which is more further north, sort of mid southwestern Ontario.
Okay.
But still, pretty close to that Lake Huron. That's my spirit animal, Lake Huron. Don't stray too far from that.
That's what we share.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'm a small town kid at heart. And then I went as far away as I possibly could. Ended up as far around the world as South Korea at one point, and then made my way back. So yeah.
You lived in South Korea?
I did. Yeah, I taught English there for a while.
For how long?
On again, off again for about a year and a half. There was some time off there, not by my choice, but because of an Asian economic crisis there. But
sure,
that gets into some of the greater narratives we're going to be talking about today.
Okay, perfect.
I was there in '97. And got back in mid '98. So
okay, I see where this is going. I see where this is going.
Yes, you do.
Before we get into that, I've always been intrigued, like how hard, like scale of 1 to 10, if you can think of it that way. How hard is it to teach English as a second language? Because I've heard English is like the hardest language for people to learn that it isn't their first or their native tongue.
So teaching proper and teaching conversational English are two kind of different things, right? Proper grammatical English is almost impossible to teach sometimes. Conversational English, if you've ever immersed yourself in a different culture, you find that starts to come a little easier. But there's a lot of tricky things that, like, for example, when I taught in Korea, the R sound doesn't exist. That's a Germanic hard sound. They can't or don't or aren't trained to roll that R in the same way that we do, which is why you get all those horrible stereotypes with people saying lice instead of rice.
Sure,
they're going to stick the tongue to the top of their mouth, and it goes, and they try to go, and instead it goes, lice instead of rice. But I was teaching kids as young as like grade 6, as old as high school, with varying levels, but really they just wanted to sort of more practice what they would, because they take English there, but they do the more hard grammatical stuff, and I just sort of provided them with an outlet and immersion and getting used to speaking the language.
Practice. Yeah.
It was great because it's what set me on my path to becoming a full-time teacher, which I am right now.
Congrats.
Thanks.
That's very cool.
Thanks.
Okay, let's get into still your story, but let's get into the Phish part of your story.
Right.
So when and where did you discover Phish?
So the when would be about 1994. Okay. And I was, at that time, I'd opened up with a friend of mine a French fry shop in a little beach town called Grand Bend, Ontario, which is right on the Lake Huron shoreline.
Cool.
And at that point in my life, I still had hair and quite long hair, but I was more of the Eddie Vedder flavor than the hippie variety. Although I love classic rock. That was totally my jam.
Sure.
And up until that point, I probably owned only like, the double disc, Best of the Grateful Dead set. That's all I had. And that summer, simultaneously, I, found some of my tribe, and they handed me a few tapes, a few Dead bootlegs, and simultaneously, in '94, that's when Hoist dropped. And, they were the people I was hanging out with weren't necessarily Phish people right away. But, soon those tapes started to come in. And then within a year of it kind of be on the periphery, Alive One hits, more Phish tapes start showing up within my friend groups. And really in that 94, 95 is where it all starts to gel for me. And I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked at that point. I couldn't get enough. And even and I really gravitated to the Gamehenge stuff first. Like I love that. I love that sort of weird world and world building and just secret language and something that I could call my own. And it really didn't take that long for me to gravitate and latch on at all.
And see, that's interesting because for a while, it took me a while to understand like the Gamehenge thing. Like I understood it's like, okay, it's his college thesis. He's making a story. He's tying it all in. It's musical. Cool. But it wasn't the first thing that like drew me in. I was like, it's a little, it took me a while with the Gamehenge thing. So that's interesting that that's like what hooked you right off the bat.
Yeah.
And you said 94. How old were you in 94 when this was all taking place?
21.
21. Perfect.
Yeah. So I was 21 in 94. But again, give me a time machine and tell me to quit the French Fry Shack and go on tour in 94. Right. Because it's going to take me a while to actually, see my first Phish show from there. Right. So again, I'm like super into Pearl Jam, Tragically Hip up here. We're just starting to ascend. And I love live music. I love going to live shows, but I was kind of like, this Fry Shack I was running, I got like 2 days off a month kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like a university project. And then the next summer I did it, and it was the same sort of thing. And really like that kind of married me to where I was, even though like some of my friends were still running off, and like I again kicked myself. I never saw Jerry. They come back, they're like, oh my God, you won't believe what happened at Deer Creek. I'm like, I know, but here I am paying for university with a French Fry Shack.
Yeah.
And then there were a couple other missed opportunities too. So like, I got done, graduated university, ended up going into the restaurant industry briefly. Some of my friends went to see, Phish at Auburn Hills in '96, missed that, had plans, for do some big stuff in '97, and then opportunity knocked. I always wanted to be a teacher, but getting into teachers college was like super, super hard. And so my friend who I went to high school with, she called and she says, hey, I'm in Korea. I'm done my contract. They say I can pick my successor. You still want to teach? And within 3 weeks, I got my visa, got my passport cleaned up, and was in the land of kimchi. Not even knowing how to say hello, and just totally lost. Well, the rest of my friends literally went to Europe that summer, '97. And yeah,
man, but there's something to be said for that though, because I'm trying to transport myself back to my 21-year-old mind. And there's no way I could have been that responsible. And like you taking that opportunity and being, and like you have this passion, right? And you're following it, and you're like, man, I gotta do me. I gotta do what's right for me. So I know you said the time machine, and if you could go back, but like, you set yourself up, man.
Let's not push that responsibility button too hard either, because
like
I did not necessarily do my best at university, which was part of the reason I wasn't getting into teachers college. And I was also, still seeing and playing a lot of live music at that time. And so responsible might be too much, but what I've always been grateful for and so thankful for is when the one opportunity that would change everything came, I just consulted a few close people in my life, and they were like, go for it. This could change everything. And it did. It changed my worldview. It changed my career path. It opened up so many things. And I still tell my students to this day, like, when those opportunities come and you're not sure, dive in, because that's the stuff that changes your life. And that's the stuff, because I let my grade 12 students ask me at the end of the year, every year, you get one question, as long as it's not getting fired. I'll answer. Well, like, like about my life.
Yeah,
Because
personal.
you try to, but you always try to like, they always say, do you have any regrets? And I'm like, oh, of course everybody does. But the way to avoid regrets is just to try everything. Get outside your box, because that's the only way that your life or your world ever changes, truly.
Dude, you're getting me fired up right now, because I have that same view. It's like, it's scary. That's why a lot of people don't do it. You
Yeah.
have an opportunity,
Yeah.
whatever that is, going to Korea, moving across the country, doing whatever. And it's like, you start thinking about all the things that could go wrong, instead of just diving in and being like, let's figure it out. What's the worst possible thing that's going to happen?
Right.
You know?
Well, and then the worst possible thing did happen. Like, the Asian economic crisis literally hits at that time. Asian economies crash. I ended up losing my job. But again, there was opportunity, because we couldn't transfer our money out of the country. And so we started converting our money into things that we could actually be tangible, like, like a laptop, or, I bought a moped, because my money was devaluing outside of Korea. So I had to do something with it inside of Korea. And so the smartest thing I did was I bought plane tickets to Thailand, Vietnam. And it worked out with my school that said, listen, you guys can't pay me. I'm not going to stay, but I can't bring all this stuff with me. So I'll come back in 2 months. We'll see where everybody is in 2 months. They let me go. I traveled Southeast Asia, came back to Korea. It did work out. I taught a little more. Nice. And then I came home for the summer of 1998, which is where I will see my beloved Phish for the first time.
I love the freaking segue, man. You have been doing these podcasts. I love the segue.
It's history teaching too, right? Like, I'm a history teacher, so you've always got to find you've always got to find those points in the timeline. I can do a chronology, baby. Oh yeah,
yeah, I love it. So we know it's in 98. When and where is your first show?
Limestone, Maine, Lemonwheel, day 1. Great story. So I came home and that July, and my friends had been to the Great Went the year before and were raving, but only one of them was able to go back, but he really wanted to do the show with me. So we had it all planned out. And then we are literally on our way out to Maine, taking the long way through Canada, because it's actually shorter to go through the States. But we were going to see friends of ours in Ottawa, and they'd gotten a hold of, like, basically like daisy chained it through my friend's mom to this guy's house. Back in the day, it was an answering machine. We got in from a night out, and we'd found out that my grandmother had passed away, sadly.
Oh, fuck, man.
Not a huge surprise, but like, also I wouldn't have left if, it was sudden enough.
Right.
So we turn around, we head back, we go to the funeral. And then my dad, to this day, I give him credit, just gave me his blessing and said, thank you for coming back. This meant a lot to everybody. Now go. Get out to the East Coast. And we like trucked it through the night, all the way out, drove 21 hours and got to Limestone, Maine, got the tent set up, and got in basically. And those first notes of Mike's song, which leads off that festival, tears just start pouring down my face. Like, I mean, pouring down my face. To this day, I've cried at a few Phish shows, but I've never quite cried that hard. And it's always indelibly, like, just etched in my mind, that first set and just that experience. And then again, another life-changing moment, right? Like, I come back from Korea and transition into this, and then that would literally change the way that I viewed music and saw music from there on in.
Man, that is, and it's, that's why, and I've said this 100 times, it's like, you can't explain that feeling. You mentioned like crying at Phish shows a couple of times. Everyone has. They had to have.
Yeah.
But just knowing the backstory
yeah.
of everything with your grandma leading up
and
to
I was prepped. Like some people's first show is literally their first experience with a band, but I'd been listening to the band at this point for 4 years. Like, we were getting, like, when I was in Korea, we were getting, boots from the 97 like tour. Like, I was like studying ready, like this was it. This was a pinnacle moment. So it meant the world to me.
Yeah. And so now, even whenever you like listen back, does that still bring back all of those emotions? Like, do you still?
For sure. Oh, who can't do that with certain shows, right? Like, we'll probably talk about a few as we go along here, but like, there's just certain moments that your soul is just pinned to, and you can place yourself right back there. It's maybe the closest thing to time travel we have, right?
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you see the band for the first time in '98. After that, after your first run of shows, you're in 100%. Like, so throughout the rest of '98, like how many shows are you seeing? Are you picking up in '99 or?
Yeah, so I still got I come back and I started a new job, but I was at Van Andel in '98, the 11/11 show. That's now an official release, which is great. Everybody check out the Halley's Comet from that. That's a classic. It's and then from there, my heaviest touring year is easily '99, because that at that point I'm like just pre-teachers college into teachers college, still living a collegiate lifestyle, fairly wide open. Still have connections to the Fry place, but not as deeply involved at that point. And so yeah, heavy, lots of shows in '99, especially December '99, including, I don't know where you at, Auburn Hills in '99, being from Michigan.
No, so I'm not originally from Michigan. I moved here for work, so I've only lived here for about 3 years.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, so, I know how iconic Auburn Hills was. Rest in peace.
Yeah, and then Big Cypress, which is one of my tentpole Phish experiences. Eight dudes and one girl in a Winnebago firing down a snowy highway. I was the one that the Winnebago was in my name because I was the only one that was over 25. So I got to drive first.
Oh, well, hey, driving first is the move.
Yes.
Because then
Although trying to sleep second is also not the move. When you realize that the shocks on this thing, like literally, like there's that one bedroom in the back, and like the Ohio Turnpike highways were not very well kept at that point, and
they're still not.
It was flipping me like an egg every as I went. But we made it down there, drove 31 hours straight, and camped at a place in Naples, and then got onto Alligator Alley in pretty good time that morning, like not realizing how jammed up it was going to get. But we didn't hit like the traffic until we actually got onto Big Seminole Indian Reserve. Whereas the same guy that I went to the first Limestone show with, he hitchhiked down Alligator Alley and like got trapped out there and ended up making better time walking than he did actually driving. So
oh my god, dude, every person that I talked to that was at Big Cypress, I always ask the same question: did you make it through the full set, or did you stop and take a nap? Did you tap out? What happened?
No.
You made it?
I mean, like I've got this queued up. Well, get into my favorite Phish moment kind of thing, but like there's nothing that beats 7:13 in the morning, watching that sun come up. You've probably seen the pictures. It was like the most beautiful sunrise. And the guys walking off stage, and the Beatles' "Here Comes the Sun," cues, and like
goosebumps.
Still.
Yeah.
No, made it through that entire thing. We were there for it. Now I will tell you, I did like what became really interesting is everybody's been to shows and hung out with people and so on and so forth. But when you hit the 4-hour mark of a show, you're looking for a change of scenery. And so I just said, guys, I'm going for a big walk. And between 4 and 5, I just walked up, back, sideways, found some people, like didn't even know were there, or just, made some friends. But and then got back to my spot where we were, and nobody was there. We all had the same idea. Well, we all came back eventually. Like, it was kind of cool because we had found a spot about halfway back. That's going to tie into another story. It had kind of a mound where like the sound just got a little bit clear. The fidelity was a little bit clearer. So that was kind of our meeting point or whatever.
The hub. Yeah,
the hub. But like, I'll never experience anything like that in my life again. And I'd had some experience like in Southeast Asia, been to a few raves, and it wasn't my first time being up all night, that's for sure.
Right.
But there was a certain energy expelled, and this sort of lucid quality to like moving in between, like really being into the music and then just kind of experiencing, being there and like never
happening.
Like, are they really actually going to play all night? Like, is this Roses Are Free really entering into like, a second half of an hour, like all this stuff. Right. So it was, Still absolutely just magical. And then so nobody could sleep that morning, I remember, either.
Well, yeah, how do you? It's like, okay, they finished at 7, like, let's go.
Yeah,
let's go to sleep.
Yeah, certainly anybody was. I mean, maybe some people did it naturally. I don't know that many people that did it naturally, but
Xanax.
Yeah, but most people, you know, had help to stay up. Let's say.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I certainly was in that category a couple of times over. So, but when we eventually did sleep, we slept, you know, as long as we could before we got back on the road, and then I was into the Winnebago. But all timer, and then from there, and so first hiatus hits, right? I think I saw one more show. I've got, you know, an amazing 2000 Toronto show story.
Hold on, you said first hiatus hits. How is your headspace whenever you get that news? Are you devastated? Are you like, man, it was fun while it lasted? Go back to that where your head was at.
I never ever expected that they would not come back. Okay. That didn't have that feeling at that time. It just felt like, you know, because I was a scholar of Dead history at that point, it just kind of felt like 74 for the Dead, where they were just kind of like, and, you know, we'll be back for 77. That was my mentality. That was always my philosophy. But what also happened at that time was there is this like a new jam band scene had opened up, right? Both in the States and in America, right? So in those in-between summers, I'm catching Mo, I'm catching Trey Band, I'm catching, you know, the New Deal was huge up here. There was a Canadian jam band called the Burt Nielsen Band that were phenomenal. Another Canadian jam band, Nero, who I actually became really good friends with. They were fantastic. There are a bunch of Canadian jam bands, actually.
Really?
Yeah. That really, a couple of East Coast bands, Grand Theft Bus, Fly Jimmy Swift, that became the Jimmy Swift Band. And even like bands like The Slip, who like I'd seen at Oswego, but they all sort of filled that gap. And so if you look at my ticket charts there, like I didn't stop seeing jam music. I just started seeing more jam music. Like it became everything that I was sort of seeing at that time.
Filling the void. So
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So like, yeah. So I even remember like, you know, getting emails from people that were in Hampton when they came back, being at a completely different show and being, you know, just as happy that I was at that show.
Right.
And when they had come back.
And vice versa. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to take it off track. I was just curious of where like your headspace was at. So you were gearing up. You were talking about the first hiatus hit, and then
well, the only show that I saw in 2000 was the Toronto show. Again, due to sort of commitments, I was starting teaching and getting ready for teaching at that point. But at that Toronto show, I think I have honestly one of my best Phish stories.
Let's hear it.
And it happens the weekend before. So again, the aforementioned beach town, Grand Bend, and working my butt off at the Fry Shack as usual. And long weekends are just nuts down there. Just
I'm sure
the town goes from being 8,000 to 24,000. Like it's just like boom. It's like it's great. It's fantastic. And being part of the staff down there, all the locals are kind of tight, but they always have people coming to visit them for the weekend and crash churches for a long weekend. And there was this girl from Toronto who, you know, we kind of hung out all weekend and partied together. And she's like, if you're ever in Toronto, hit me up. I manage this bar called the Mad Bar. Come see me, you know, I'll set you up. I'm like, well, actually, I'm in Toronto next week because the band Phish is coming. She's like, who put you up to that? I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, who told you to say that? I'm like, what are you talking about? I am a massive hip. Look at this hair. Please imagine much more hair. She's like, they're coming to my bar for a private event the night before the show. I'm like, fuck up. What are you talking about? Now what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And so to this day, her business card is the only thing on my ticket collage that's up on my wall that's not a legit ticket, and it's right beside that show.
So they actually went.
Oh yeah. So again, I took my good pal who we did that first Lemonwheel show with, and we show up at the door, and there's a dude there with a clipboard, and I say, okay, Scott King +1. don't see you. I'm like, try Scotty. No. So again, I mentioned just met this person. She's just met me, but I had
name drop.
As we all did back in the early 2000s, hemp necklace, beads, and then a necklace with like words on it that said "Fry Guy," which, at that time in my life had quite the double entendre.
Sure.
Being both a French fry guy and the dude with hair to his nipples. And so, absolutely. He looked up Fry Guy +1 right there.
No shit.
Come on.
She didn't even give you the heads up of like, hey, that's what I'm putting you on here as.
Nope. No. It could have all ended right there.
Oh my God.
Ended right there. So we get in, and clearly it's a mix of fans and industry. A great DJ called the Gratefully Dedicated Sound System was spinning at that point. It was cool. And sure enough, the buses were definitely out back. So we get in there, and she says, I find her, and I'm like, hey, I got in, tell her the story. She's like, if you see members of the band, I don't know what the hell they look like. You find me, point them out, and I just want to introduce myself as the manager. So I'm like, well, that's Paige McConnell over there. She's like, let's go. So I'm like, oh, so away we went. And I got to talk to Paige, and it was just after Cyprus. So of course, the only thing I wanted to talk to him about was like what that experience was like. And he was very gracious, and we were, cognizant to be very, gracious of his time as well.
Sure. Yeah.
I had met Fishman actually at a Jazz Mandolin Project show, because he was drumming for Jazz Mandolin Project there for a while on his birthday in '99. So I'd already gotten the Phish Boy Scout badge, if you will. And then I saw Mike over by a sushi table. And
this is at the bar?
This is at the bar. Yeah. So they had like a big sushi spread or whatever. And they had just come back from Japan. And so I'm like, segue. I'm a segue guy. Yes. I'm like, yeah. So I'm like, hey, you must have eaten a lot of that over there. And Mike wasn't as warm in that situation. Maybe I bugged him because he was just about to eat some sushi and he was hungry. I don't know. Sure. I would find him later and bug him about Destiny Unbound when I'd had a few more drinks.
Okay. We got to get into that too.
Yeah. We ever playing Destiny Unbound? It was a very short conversation. But by the end of the night, Trey had spent most of the evening sort of in a more closed off area, not so much mingling. Sure. His time was much more in demand. And we saw him being snuck out behind the bar at about 2:00 in the morning. And so at that point, my buddy Mike and I were like, you know what, we're done here. We've done all we need to do. Let's move on to the next stop. And so we go up front to hail a cab, and they may have snuck him out the back door, but he came walking right around front on the sidewalk with a bunch of people getting ready to load into a Suburban and go to his next stop. And so there was Trey, and we were like, hey, how you doing? And so we shook hands and, told him to have a good show. And he was so funny. He was like, do you want me to sign something? And we're like,
he said that?
Yeah. He's like, do you want me to sign something? We're like, no, that's okay. We're good. Okay. And he walked away a few more steps. He's like, you sure you don't want me to sign something? Like
just goofing with you? Yeah.
Goofy as goofy can be. And we're like, no, man, just go ahead, have a good show. And then he got into the Suburban, clunk, 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 whoosh, off they went. And my lasting memory was just how soft his hands were. He had like the most like lotiony, soft hands of a human being at that point.
Money maker, man.
Yeah, I know. I guess lotion, you got to take care of those bad boys. So yeah, in that night, I got the 3 members that I hadn't yet pressed flesh with. So that was good. Wow. Yeah.
This may be another first. You've met, or at least on this show, you've met every single member of the band.
Yeah. And I mean,
that's pretty cool.
I mean, Paige was the only one I actually had a conversation with. Like Fishman, it was literally like his birthday. He came back out, shook hands with us, to stick around to wish him a happy birthday. But still, yeah. And that kind of access, I mean, actually, it kind of feels like it happens a little more now on the Trey side of things. But like, because they used to be notorious for like cutting people's heads off in pictures and all that kind of stuff. But that night and that chance, incident was just, gives you one more connection. Perfect. One more reason to come back, and a great story to tell.
Yeah, no. And I always wonder, because the band, it might be the actual members, or it might be someone that's running their social media or whoever, but they have their finger on the pulse of, I'm not saying this podcast specifically, but they know what's being said on the internet. They're not completely oblivious to it. So I've always wondered if like whenever people are sharing these stories, like, if I were to clip that where you were telling that story,
yeah,
and if they were to just be scrolling or somebody were to see it and pass it along to Trey or whoever, if they'd be like, oh yeah, I remember that.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I would guess at that point of their career and that time in life, they were still in the happy years, but that late at night may not have a memory. But if I ever do get the opportunity to be in the same room again, I will mention, this isn't our first meeting. That's for sure.
Well, how much would you shit yourself if Paige was like, oh yeah, no, Scotty, right?
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. No, never gonna happen. Just so happy to share the same air.
Dude, that's amazing. And I love hearing these stories because it's like I get to live it through you, that's such a cool story. Like how many people I'm sure there's a handful, but like how many people can say that, met the entire band,
And I'm really glad I had one very trustworthy individual with me that night too. Like my buddy Mike, who like we've done all these shows. We were in Toronto together just recently. Like he could tell the exact same story in the exact same way. So it's always nice to have,
back up.
It wasn't just a dark alley. It's like, oh, there was Trey. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Because this is before, like you can do like the selfie thing. It's like, hey.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. Way before, like no cameras. I think I may have had like a flip antenna Motorola phone at that point, but that was about it.
And that whole story wouldn't have, dude. And this is the shit that like where my mind goes on a tangent, or like on a little other path. None of it would have happened without Fry Guy.
Exactly.
That necklace, man.
Yeah. And that little town of Grand Bend has brought me, more connections and more crazy stories than you can possibly imagine. And the fact that it folded into my Phish universe there, deeply too, because it was always me leaving that town to go to the Phish universe. That's where the streams kind of collided.
I love that, dude. What a cool story. That may be my favorite story that I've heard on here so far.
Oh, stop. You're just saying that because I'm the international guest and you're trying to butter me up. It's like, I'm going to out Canadian the Canadian by being super nice to him right now.
Super nice. Yeah. Okay. So after, I'm having a hard time, speaking of the segues and transitions, I'm having a hard time transitioning after that story.
We kind of popped around so good. So well, it was, so from there we're in 2003, caught the winter run, got caught 2 nights in Cincinnati. Those were great shows. Got cancer or got diagnosed with cancer.
You did?
Yeah. The Monday after that Cincinnati weekend, I got home to find out that this cyst that they had removed, they had misdiagnosed, and it was actually a lymph node that had gone cystic, and I had thyroid cancer that had traveled into my neck. So I had thyroid cancer, and then into my lymph nodes. So I come off that high of the Cincinnati show, being like, those were fantastic shows. Really in a fantastically happy place in my life. I just met this girl named Diane, who's now my wife, and like we'd been dating 6 weeks. She couldn't get the time off university to come to the shows, but we did those shows, and then I got back and I got that diagnosis. And by that May, I was having my thyroid removed and those lymph nodes removed. Went through I didn't have to do chemo, but I did have to do a specialized radiation treatment that they do just for thyroid cancer, where they radiate iodine, and they get you to like go starve your body of as much iodine as you possibly can, because the thyroid is one of the only things in the body that absorbs iodine. And so once they remove the thyroid, any stuff that's left, including thyroid cancer, will gravitate toward that iodine. They radiate it. And maybe the least scientific thing I've ever seen in my life, they like take you to this room where like everybody else is wearing radiation suits except for you, and you lean into this lead chamber, and all there is this like bendy straw with a test tube, and you just go and you drink it, and it just goes all throughout your whole body. You're literally radioactive at that point.
Holy shit.
Then they took me to another part of the hospital that was like closed off. And those giant styrofoam water cups, like the really, really big, almost cooler size. You just keep drinking those and peeing until your Geiger counter count is low enough for you to enter back into the public. And then even then you have to isolate for the next 5 days, because everything that comes out of your body, sweat and otherwise, is radioactive. And so I had to do 2 of those treatments. But in between those treatments, I went to it.
No shit.
Yeah. So,
wow.
Because I needed that at that point in my life, and
Yeah,
I was
you did.
pretty addicted to Phish festivals at that point.
Sure.
And so I wasn't missing another trip to Limestone because that was just too pivotal for me. And I was pretty healthy at that point otherwise. And again, that girl stuck around and canceled her trip to Australia for the summer to stay home and take care of me. And that pretty much sealed the deal there. And
sure, yeah. And so was your wife, whenever you met her, was she already a Phish fan, or did you kind of introduce her to that?
So one of the first things you do when you meet a girl back in those days is you flip through their CD binder. They're
what am I getting into here? Yeah. Ace of Base,
strike one for Enya. Oh, there's a Ben Harper CD. I can live with that. Sure. And then there was Farmhouse. So I'm like, a little bit of hope here.
Okay.
Plus, she was digging on some of that Canadian jam band stuff that I was into too. And so while she's not like a serious head like I am, and certainly not like a music obsessive as I am, because I am totally music obsessive. You know, she came to it. She's been to a few festivals now. I think her show count's only at about 11, but you know, every once in a while she gets on the bus and isn't totally out of place there. That's for sure.
Has a good time.
And then of course it was like incredible. Like it was, yeah, that was another just, you know, game-changing moment. O3 Phish, often overlooked, but I think people have most people have checked out Phish, although I'm always surprised to talk to people. That winter tour and some of that summer stuff is a complete blind spot for a lot of people.
It really is. And I was going to say this earlier, but I went in a different way.
Sure.
O3 is underrated, and so is, or at least in my world that I've experienced so far with talking to people, 99 is a super underrated year too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really solid stuff in 99, and Trey's tone in 99 is not to nerd out too much, but there's a special, I'm just going to call it special sauce, because I don't know what everything's called. I know he's got tube screamers. I know he's got stuff like that, but I don't know what it is, but it's special.
They all had the money to dial into better gear at that point, I think. Like, I think that's where financially you see him being able to, like, you know, I don't think he was on the Mesa Boogie yet at that point. But anyway, like, you know, they're finding the rare amps. They're finding that kind of stuff. I love 99 because that is statistically my most seen year.
That's where you really got the ball rolling.
Yeah. But like, people are always trying to make, you know, well, 97, 98, it's kind of like 73, 74. And I think
making the tie-in,
making the tie-in, Dead tie-in that way. And I guess there's some merit to that, except for the fact that, like, the Dead didn't really play in 75 and very little in 76, right? So 99 gets overlooked, but you're right, 99 and 03, they're blind spots. Some would argue 04 is a blind spot too, but there's the mind's been stripped at that point. And
that's a very good way to put it. Yeah.
So anyway, I did do Coventry, and had that experience as well. And then I really thought that was, now you want to talk about when I thought it was it. Then I was pretty sure. And in the years that would follow it, like, I wasn't hold on to that much hope. Did you ever see a 70 Volt Parade show when Trey Trey's band, he gets away from Tab and he has another band called 70 Volt Parade.
Dead ass. This is the first time I'm hearing of this. Call me a noob, whatever, for everybody listening, but I've never heard of this.
You know why? Because it was terrible. Okay, that's mean. I'm gonna roll that back. It's easily the worst Trey show I was ever at.
And hold on, it's called 75 Volt.
70 Volt Parade.
70 Volt Parade. Okay, sounds like an emo band.
Yeah. Well, and he had cobbled it with the same people that he had recorded the album Shine with. And it was a lot of like studio guys and otherwise, but I think like he even like switched drummers halfway through that tour. There was nobody from Trey Band and obviously nobody from Phish anywhere near it. It just didn't gel. It just didn't have any vibe. And it was not strong. So, but like I said, two things kind of like buoy me at that point. One, there's still amazing jam music going on from other bands,
Sure,
and lots of other festivals and that kind of stuff to head and see and tour around. And then Canada's indie music scene at that point is exploding. So I'm seeing Broken Social Scene, I'm seeing Arcade Fire, I'm seeing like all these guys in their proto forms, like really early versions, you know, the Stills, all this kind of stuff. Like, and so I was seeing as much, if not more, live music, but just a different variety. And I really thought at that point, you know, I've crested into my 30s. I've got a serious girlfriend. I bought a house. I'm like, okay, my Phish, this is great. I'm still always going to love Phish. I'm always going to listen to Phish, but I'm moving in on to a different phase. And it just made sense.
Prioritizing it. Yeah.
Correct. And so when they do start to come back, like, you know, Mike and Trey played those shows with Benevito Russo duo. So I caught the Grab Tour show, and that was good, but not great. It kind of solidified. Yeah, you're right. Things
This is
done. Yeah. They come back in 2009. I saw one show at Darien. It was okay. But the moment I got back on the bus was Pine Knob 2011.
Dude, we were talking before we started recording about attendance bias.
Yep.
I was at that show, and that was the show that I talked about on attendance bias.
Oh, I listened to that show. I listened to that one because
that was me.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I took a dude that had never been to a Phish show to that show, and because he was kind of interested, and he had been getting into some of the stuff that I've been getting into. He was a little younger than I was, like about 10 years younger. He'd sort of missed everything. So, we ended up going to that show, and by the time we got to the end of that show, even the end of that disease, like, but you remember the energy in that barn too was just like insane. It felt back. It felt like good. And like, he's like, are they all like this? I'm like, yes, kind of, but that was pretty good. You know, yeah. I was having a hard time sort of quantifying, but like all around me, people were just like, wow, what a show. And I think to this day that stands up as one of the best of 11 and even of early 3.0.
Yeah. It's definitely in the conversation.
Yeah,
for sure. Top 5.
Yeah.
And it was funny because did you say that your buddy that you took, that was his first show?
Correct. Yeah.
I took a buddy with me, and it was his first show. So like he's been on the podcast before, and we grew up and, you know, like listening to music, listening to Allman Brothers, playing music together and stuff, and all shared a lot of like core artists. And when I started getting into Phish, I kept being like, man, check this out. And he's like, I don't have time right now. Like, I can't do it. I'm just like, listen to Phish. And so he finally starts listening to it a little bit. And he's like, okay. He's like, I get it. He fucking gets hooked.
Yeah.
Me and my other buddies were like, hey, we're going to, because I think that run we did Pine Knob, we did Blossom, we did Alpine. Like, we were going on a stretch. Yeah. And we were like, dude, come on, man. Let's go. Let's go. And got him to do it. And he was like, after that show, I was like, dude, you just saw something fucking special for your first show. I was like, this is fucking cool.
You know what was even funnier was, and this is totally like getting to live through somebody else's eyes, watching him come back and try to explain to a certain group of friends in the same way that I've been trying to do for almost a full decade up to that point, with the same sort of zeal and enthusiasm. He's like, no, he was right. Like, you got and they're like, you're in a cult. You're in a cult now, and we're sorry for you. It's like, no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
And so over the years, we've been able to pull people from that group of friends slowly but surely to a show here and there. But he's stayed on the train, and we were actually in Pine Knob again for that hellacious storm that we just all endured this summer.
Man,
but taking us back to the scene of the crime.
And we talked about that we were both, that's how we met. Actually, I don't know if I mentioned that whenever we started this. That's how we met, was on the Helping Friendly podcast.
Yeah.
And we were both at Pine Knob this year, 2022. And it was, I was going to say a shit show, but it was a rain show for sure.
Well,
we got some nuggets though.
The first hour of the storm was nothing to sneeze at. It was a good old fashioned, it's way too hot, what's that giant black cloud coming toward us, everybody duck kind of experience that we've all had.
Yep.
And yeah, like I said on the HF pod, like, you know, an embrace the suck moment where everybody kind of gets into it by just ignoring it. And I've gone back and I've listened to that show again. there's certainly other shows this summer I'm probably going to listen to more, or sections more.
Sure.
But for what we managed to pull together that night, way better than a cancellation, because as I think I mentioned also on the HF pod, I have an incredible, like, Phish has not canceled a lot of shows, and I've been to most of them. Having been to both Curveball and Toronto 13. But there's no worse feeling than knowing that you've been in the parking lot and you're not going to see a Phish show, and how to pivot from that experience, because some people don't deal with that kind of stuff very well.
I would,
especially if you've been pre-gaming hard in the lot at that point. Like Toronto show, I just remember seeing one of my friends who thought he had timed things well, as a little Phish lingo, and then was just sort of wandering about the city of Toronto, timing things well.
Like, my jaw hurts.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh man, sure. But yeah, no, it was. I went back and listened to, and for the hand that we were dealt, I'll take that any day of the week.
Yeah, and so now full-time teacher, married, couple of kids. I try to see a show or two a year. That's where I am at. I'm still the only 2 festivals I've missed since my first. I couldn't do Indio. I couldn't go out to California, and I could not make it to the first Watkins Super Bowl.
Gotcha.
I missed that one just for prior commitments to a wedding. But I'm resolute. Festival Phish is still like some of my favorite Phish, and just going to Magnaball and like you sent me some free questions or whatever, and let's segue again into sort of favorite jams and that kind of stuff. But like, how
doing all the work for me, I love it. Man.
How thrilled was I to see that the new Live Phish 3 was going to be the tweezer pants from Magnaball, right? like just absolutely, like, I'm like, oh my god, that's I couldn't have picked a better one, because of the modern era, or we'll say 3.0 if we want to get into categorization.
Sure.
That moment, that weekend, ranks right up there with like my Big Cypress experience as far as like
really
emotion and all that kind of stuff, because that festival was perfect. Like, it was perfect weather. It was like, I looked around and I just felt like we were all such pros at what we were doing. Like, those early days of festivaling, like some guy would have like an old Mexican beach blanket, like as a sun shield. And like, your water bottle was like a milk jug that you'd converted to bring in. And now, everybody's got like, Terra packs, and like we built this like double tent with like, we were cooking gourmet meals. It was my buddy's stag. So he had organized that his stag party was happening at Magnaball, which was like
your buddy's stag.
Yeah. So like his bachelor party.
Oh, gotcha. Cool.
Yeah, his bachelor party was Magnaball.
Wow, dude, that's perfect.
And a lot of his good close friends are Phish guys. So we all like,
even better,
big reunion time. Did the Magnaball up, did it up like pro. Had beautiful weather, beautiful experiences, and then on top of it all, just some top-notch playing to finish off, one of the best summers that Phish has played in the modern era.
Dude, I was so sad. All my friends they got an RV, went to Magnaball.
Yeah.
I was like, and I stayed behind because at that point, I'm still in college and I'm like broke, basically. I'm like, I can't justify, like the RV or like a plane ticket. I can't afford it. Yeah. And then watching as the set lists roll in, I'm like, God damn it. Win.
But that's part of the Phish experience too, right? Like, I was thinking going to Blossom this summer. I
was too, dude. It's down the road.
It was right there. It was right down the road. But like, I knew that I was going to be doing Toronto, and I knew I was going to be doing Pine Knob, and to tack that extra one on and in a summer, like, but you get those feelings, I should be there. And then the set list roll in and you just want to never miss a Blossom show. I know why. I love that barn. But so that's all part of the highs and lows of being a Phish fan, my friend.
It is. You have to have the lows.
I mean, there are some people that are there for everything, it feels like. You look online, you're like, how the hell are you actually there for every single amazing show? What have I done wrong in my life? But then again, maybe I'm doing my life right, and they're just, they're only getting good Phish shows. So
who knows? But I often wonder that too. Like, you're on Phish Twitter.
Yep.
I see like there's like these core, I don't, well, for the lack of a better term, we'll call them Phish Twitter famous people. There's like a core little group of people that are everyone knows.
Yep.
And they're like at every show.
Yep.
Not just Phish, but like every Humphrey show, every Phish show, every show. And I'm like, I want to like direct message and be like, what do you do for work? Like, are you guys hiring? Like, what?
I know. I'm like,
how do you have all this money and all this freedom?
Were you part of a big tech company at some point? Like, that's always my theory. Whenever I don't know how people got to where they are, I'm like, it was some sort of big tech thing that I just never got in on. But,
investing, Bitcoin, what are you, Dogecoin? What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And so you were mentioning Magnaball.
Yeah.
And mentioning the tweezer pants, if you will. So that's one of your favorite jams of all time. What are some other ones that just pop in your head off the bat?
Well, here's a recency bias for you, but like the Went Gin, like, I did my annual spin of the Went Gin yesterday. As after I needed to come down. We went to a Jays game yesterday in Toronto. Cool. at the Rogers Center. It's my son's first Jays game. We were pretty stoked.
Cool.
Okay. I'm gonna segue again because this is I love your podcast because it's Tangent Fest and I'm a Tangent Fest kind of guy. But this is a We Are Everywhere moment. So like,
let's hear it.
I had one Jay shirt. I like the powder blue Jay stuff. I don't know why, but I like that vintage look. And we realized that we had used a dryer this summer that wasn't our dryer, and it was now a crop top. And I was like, okay, I don't have a Jay shirt anymore because I'm not exposing, the better people of Toronto to the uniboob down here. It's
the uniboob.
Not what they need to see.
Right.
So I'm like, but I do kind of want to rock my powder blue, and so I've got a powder blue Grateful Dead shirt that I threw on. I'm like, this is great. I'll wear my Jays hat and I'll get out there and do that virtue signaling that we all do as fans. It's like, and like, I literally like, was coming back from the bathroom with one of the kids and, doing the aisle walk, and the guy right beside me, I walked by and I think it was the first time he kind of got a look at my shirt. And about a minute later, kind of leans over. He's like, hey, I was like, do you like the Dead? I'm like, oh yeah. Do you like the Dead? He's like, oh yeah. He's like, did you see Jerry? I'm like, no, I didn't. He's like, I did. And like, from there, it was just like, boom, boom, boom. Within a half an hour, he's got my number. I've given him a mix of Fall 21 that I've done on Live Phish. Cause he's like, I'm just sort of starting to get back into the Phish thing. Cause he kind of dropped, like, he sort of let it go and didn't come back for 4.0 or whatever. He just different priorities, different life things. And so I'm sending him a playlist. We're talking about stuff, and like my wife at one point, she's like, you're here to see a Jays game. The old stop talking about, this isn't your podcast that you go on, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, but I just thought it was so great because I'm literally doing a podcast tomorrow called We Are Everywhere. And he's a teacher too. So here's a teacher who's a Phish and Dead fan sitting beside me at the Jays game. We are everywhere.
Perfect, dude. And it is. We are everywhere. I have a funny story like that too. I was this was last month. My girlfriend and I went to a Chris Stapleton concert.
Oh yeah.
And so before we got to because it was at a casino here in Michigan, and we got to town about an hour and a half early. We're like, okay, let's go to a bar and get a drink and get something to eat. And we're in this bar, and this dude is wearing a Still Your Face with the state of Michigan inside of it.
Okay, yeah.
And I was like, oh, cool. And so I wasn't bothered, trying super hard, but every time that he would kind of look in our direction, I would try to make eye contact, Never did. And then as we were leaving, he was out on the patio, smoking a cigarette or something. And we're walking by. And I was like, hey man, come here. And he was like, me? I was like, yeah, come here. Because I've got the bolt tattooed on my middle finger.
Yeah, there you go.
Homage to Jerry. And he came over and I just stuck my finger out and I was like, I like your shirt, man. And he was like, thanks. I was like, you like the Dead?
Yeah.
And he was like, oh no, man. He's like, my buddy gave me this shirt. He's like, I thought it looked cool. And I was like, Have a good day, man.
there's well, and talk about that. Like, so when the Jerry Bear like must have hit its 50-year copyright license or whatever, and it was just everywhere. Like students started showing up at school about 2 years ago with dead hoodies, and I'd just be like,
you can get them in Old Navy.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now I'm just like, oh, this is going to get a lot tougher. No more like nice shirt, man. Like you really got to go for the heavy sort of, like
name 3 songs.
Yeah. Or like a lot shirt just to make sure that somebody's, official.
Like in the fold, like saying or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But anyway, we were saying Went Gin. So Went Gin, I again spun that again yesterday. And like the sheer intensity, your pound for pound, what you're getting second for second in that jam is just as pure, like it's just pure Phish. Like it's just pure. It's just so rock steady. And for years, that was my favorite tape. Like that tape, that set, worn thin, busted tape.
So good.
Like so good. But also just like it's really interesting because what defines a great jam then is always different than what defines a great jam now. But if you ever just wanted to get somebody into like pure, this is an easy access. If you like this, then I think you're on the right track. The Went Gin is right there. Right?
I love that answer.
Yeah. Subsequently, the Riverport Gin is also another one of my, like, I can't ever get enough of that jam.
That has to be on the list.
And respun that recently. When my buddy and I were talking, I don't know, we were talking about 98 and we were going back and forth and talking about 88 and 811 and all that kind of stuff. And then the Riverport was like an old school add-on to one of the live Phish ones. So I'm like, there's soundboard of that. And I'm like, have I ever actually sought out the soundboard of that? Or did I just always have the old odds?
Right.
So I went back and of course my stereo setup is way better than it used to be. And it was like a revelation again. I'm like, I knew it was good, but then I was just like, if you ever wanted to describe somebody perfectly what made 98 what 98 was, just point them straight at the Riverport Gin, right?
Man,
that is
and hearing you, like, I'm excited to listen to that today because it's been like there's all these like iconic jams, right?
Yes.
That like if you're in the fold, like you can rattle them off and it's like yes.
Yeah.
But if they're not in your steady rotation, like I couldn't tell you the last time I listened to the Riverport Gin, right? But I can like hear it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need to listen to that now.
Go back and I don't know whether you're a live Phish guy or not, but get the soundboard, right? It's there. It's there for you to access. And you're right. And I thought about this when I saw the question on the call sheet, because I'm definitely at a point right now where, I'll listen to all the new stuff I can. I'll call back, maybe go back to, shows from past before, but then there's always the memorial dates, right? So it's like, let's check our calendar. Today is, February 28th. I wonder what I'll be listening to today. Right.
Yeah.
There's the tweezer and or like, the spring run or whatever, right? Like spring, like we have these like moments, but Riverport Gin doesn't have its own sort of holiday date. It's
right.
not whereas Went Gin does. Like I listen to the Went Gin quite a bit because that's a big day otherwise. So I always try to pump the tires on that one a little bit too, as another one that people should go back to and give a little bit of love to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's with the you mentioned like looking at the calendar and like revisiting history. Do you follow there's an Instagram page called Phishtory?
No, not that one.
I might be misquoting it, but it's something like they spell it history with a P in front of it, like Phishtory. On this day in Phishtory is what it's called. Okay. And they'll I always love seeing their stuff pop up because it'll be like
there's something I follow. There's something I follow on Twitter that kicks stuff at me every once in a while. But most of it's just from being the nerd that I am and like and it's kind of a history thing too. I got to admit, being a history teacher, I always tell the kids dates aren't important, and they're not necessarily. I mean, you should know the dates, but that's not really what we're here to talk about history about, right?
Right.
But by the same token, like being able to find your way back to that perfect jam or recommend that perfect jam, you tend to get a few dates lodged in your brain. That's for sure.
Absolutely. I'm curious.
Yep.
I always, it's a well-known thing that every story, every good story at least, has to have some conflict. There has to be conflict in every story.
True. It's true.
So one of the questions I like to ask after we love on the band for an hour is, what song would you be okay with never hearing again? It's a nice way of saying, what song do you not like?
Yeah. So I remember this moment from Toronto in 19. I've never prayed for a song to not be played so hard in my life. Because the Raptors had won the NBA championship. And so I'm like, they're going to play The Line. They're going to play. I just know for like, they're going to try to tribute it somehow and we're going to get The Line. They didn't. But yeah, I could go without ever seeing The Line. I just, from a songwriting perspective, it just doesn't bring me a whole lot of joy in any way, shape, or form. I'm a pretty positive guy when it comes to most Phish stuff. Although I said this on the Attendance Bias podcast when I was on, Dogs Sold Things has never lit me up inside either. Even though it's rare and people get excited when it does come around, a straight sort of blues romper never really kind of caught fire with me. And but it's a silly song. It's a Phish song. You know, it's not a poorly written song in any way, shape, or form.
But you could hear any band play that song and be like, that's pretty much what it would sound like.
So it's more of a nostalgia pick for a lot of people, but musically it doesn't really light me on fire. There was one point in time where I had a serious overexposure to Gaiuti. And I would have told you that I never wanted to hear Gaiuti again as long as I lived. And now I think I'd be really excited because it's been forever.
I couldn't tell you. Yeah.
I need Brian Brickman on here to give me the official stats.
It was pulled up. And it's funny because I had kind of like the same, well, not the same because I wasn't overexposed to it. I was just on first take, kind of like what I was saying with the Game Hinge stuff earlier. I was like, I'm okay with this one. But my buddy, the same buddy I was telling you, I took him to his first show at Pine Knob in 2011. Yeah. He was a big Gaiuti guy. And he was like, dude, you got it. Like, this is like, you want to talk Phish? Like, this is Phish. And like, slowly I've been like, yeah, no, you're right. Like, I'm on the Gaiuti train now. Like,
and it's funny because I got Story on the Ghost on vinyl. And,
cool.
You know, when I got to Gaiuti and actually kind of heard it in great fidelity and like broke it down compositionally, I'm like, no, this is a killer song. I just got really sick of like being 99 there, right? And hearing from, it's kind of like, I'm out of here. Right? I'll come back for the really sort of I'll go pee in between. But Gaiuti was kind of that one. And then Caspian, I have an interesting relationship with Caspian because I'm kind of a fucker pants magnet. Like, I've seen a lot and there was a while there where I was just like, you're at a show, you're gonna get a Caspian. And then again, talking about getting turned around on a song and having it take a special meaning in your life. So first I get the Tweezer Caspian at Magnaball, which again is just sheer motion and brilliance and like takes me to a place in time where like I talked when we were talking before about the bump that we found when we were at Cyprus. I found another bump at Magnaball and I found it right at that time. My buddy and I kind of were like, we didn't like our sight lines, we didn't like where we were seeking a new spot, and there was like this little hill, and all of a sudden like the sound cleared up, the sight lines cleared up. We found again like we'd found this magical little bump in the middle of nowhere to experience that from. But then I was also in Pittsburgh in 2017 and they played a 15-minute Caspian to close out the first set, and it was awesome. It was and that whole Lost early tour of 2017, pre Baker's Dozen, I saw both the Dayton and the Pittsburgh shows, and like that whole warm up for what the Baker's Dozen would be. I think Phish scholars are going to look back on that at a certain point and say, this is where the Baker's Dozen was actually born. right? Like where they started like playing with extended stuff out, and that Caspian was awesome too. So now I'm both like, we're gonna get a Caspian, which we didn't either in Toronto or in Pine. The curse is broken, not curse, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But also, you know, I've reevaluated what Caspian's role in my life is. It's no longer derided; it is celebrated.
There you go. And I had that same kind of revelation with, and I've talked about this before, with Joy. Because I always chalked up Joy to be one of those songs where it's like, oh, God damn it. Especially if like you rip chord into it, you know, and go take a piss, get a beer, whatever. But then once I realized, you know, like what the song is like about and what it's a tribute to, and it's like, man, like this is special. And if at any point he wants to play that and they want to go into that to, you know, remember his sister, like, who am I to be like, you ruined my show, man? Like, so now whenever I hear a Joy, I'm like, hey man, I'm here with you, you know?
Yeah. And it's super applicable too, to like, it's not just, I know the origin story behind it, but like when I became a dad as well, like just the sentiment and the well wishes that you have for the people that you sort of love and bring into your life. Some of the new Phish really resonates with you as you get older and sort of apply it to your own life. Joy is one of those songs that it's powerfully emotional for me. It may not fit where you want in the second set necessarily.
Sure.
But if you find the right time or place for it, it's great that way. I think we're in for a bit of a re-examination of the whole Joy period of Phish, to be honest. Like after the 20 years later from Toronto, that song again is one of my buddies that I was there with. He's like, he's on a tear with that right now. He's like, I forgot about this song, and like something about the way the lyrics hit that night. And, you know, I think many of us are at least 20 years into our Phish journey at this point, and thinking about what that kind of means and being still down. And there's still some good there.
There is. Yeah. And I joke all the time, like, you know, because I've said many times, like my favorite type of Phish is like the dark Phish, you know, like I want the evil, you know, Kareem and stuff like that.
Yeah, me too.
And we're kind of in this era right now, and I don't mean like 3.0 or 4.0, but like kind of we're in this era of like love and light, you know, with the singing, the lyrics, per se. And if that keeps the band happy, keep writing about puppy dogs and love and sugar plums. I don't care. But every once in a while, whenever you go type 2, just let's see what's under the rug a little bit, which they've done a really good job of doing. So
yes.
No complaints on my end.
I do love the evil Phish as well, and crave it, and I think it offsets a lot of the love and light stuff as well too, right? Like
yin yang, man.
Even like, you know, when like the Soul Planet the other night, like now the expectation is almost that it's going to be the opposite to the happiness there. When Trey hits that first sort of crank, it's like, yes, make it like,
let's go,
do something nasty. Like it's been really fascinating, this whole effects era that we're in right now, and how that's changed a lot of people. You know, I got a quote I got to share. The guitar player in my band.
Wait, you're in a band?
Yeah. Well,
what's the name of your band?
I'm transitioning right now. We're the former band I played in the last 9 years is a band called Kevin Green and the Awesome Sauce. I was a member of the Awesome Sauce, but we were the backup band for a singer-songwriter named Kevin Green, I've been playing music with for 20 years.
What do you play?
In that outfit, I played drums. Although I would tout myself as a multi-instrumentalist. Very nice. My first love was piano, and then I got kind of bored with classical piano and switched as a teenager to the thing that would piss everyone off the most, which was drums. Became a drummer, wanted to learn how to play guitar, but the guitar player in my band at that time wouldn't teach me. He's like, no, you're the drummer. So I taught myself how to play guitar. So I could you know, really pick up girls at bonfires, let's be honest. But then I started doing like solo acoustic gigs around town and really got into like looping and really like what Keller Williams was doing back in those days, and really got into that kind of stuff. And then with Kevin Green, his songs, I've been in 3 different bands with him, and some of those songs have carried through. And I've been a bass player in one of those bands. I was and now the drummer in the Awesome Sauce. But
so you play it all.
Jack of all trades, master of none. But I do enjoy being able to pick up almost anything. I suffered a concussion, unfortunately, in February of this year when I was skiing. I was skiing with one of my kids, and he was learning a new trick in the terrain park. And I'd kind of skied down an area that had a lot of snowboard jumps and stuff in it to try to get ahead of him to like film him doing this new trick. And I skied it 100 times before. I was way more worried about where he was on the hill and setting up the shot. I lost track, and I caught air when I didn't expect to catch air. And I landed like my glove hard on my face this way. Like I was wearing a helmet, but still. And it's really, it's been a tough go, to be perfectly honest. I say to people right now, I'm about 75%.
No shit.
Yeah. I will be going back to full-time teaching the fall, but I didn't teach from February on. I couldn't, because my big triggers are fluorescent lighting, sound, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, I tried drumming about 3 weeks ago. I'm not there yet. It's too the snare especially gets right to me quickly, and it's not just hitting the snare and hearing the noise come back. There's actual, like with drumming, there's a certain vibration that comes through your whole body, and I feel like it just gets right into the spot that I can't be in right now. But if you look at my pictures from Phish tour this summer, I'm in sunglasses. I got earplugs in, which is kind of smart anyway these days, because I was worried about losing my hearing a few years ago, as being a drummer for as long as I have been. But anyway, so I've switched over to keys, and I'm softer, some of the members of the Awesome Sauce and a couple other guys, we're putting together a new outfit. We're just in the salient stage tonight. We don't have a name yet. I joked that we should call the band Wish List, because everybody's just bringing like their 3 favorite songs that they've always wanted to play with a band but never got to play before. So tonight we're taking a crack at Sand, which is fun, I'm excited about. And I'm going to do some keys. I'm going to see how that goes, right? Like it's a nice way for me to sort of get back into, and I sing, right? So like I can bring that to the table no matter what, but I don't necessarily want to be, I don't I don't quite have the rock star chops anymore. I'd like to have an instrument protecting me somehow.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, we're talking about effects, and like,
sorry.
In this quote, I got to get this quote in.
Yeah.
So the guitar player in my band, he's like, Phish aren't aging like rock stars; they're aging like jazz musicians.
I like that.
They're not aging like rock stars. They're aging like jazz musicians. And I think when you look at a guy like Herbie Hancock, or if you look, at jazz musicians as they began to move through and find different ways, different instruments, different effects to tell their stories, maybe they've lost the speed. Maybe they've lost a little bit of like that, whatever.
Rawness,
that made them like, but they've picked up other soundscapes, and they've picked up other ways to like make people interested. And I really, like, when he said that, I took that home and I literally laid in bed and thought about that, just all the ways that's an apt comparison, because all 4 of those guys are masters in their craft, absolute masters in their craft. They're masters in their sound, their tone. And so when Page finally masters his Moog, and we see the Moog take center stage, and like that moment, like just when that started to creep in again, you're like, I've been waiting for you to like do that for so long. But then he goes back to like this summer, really tastefully putting the organ back in places it hasn't been for a while.
You're right.
And I'm just like, I'm hearing more organ, and like, so he's got full mastery. It's inevitable. He's almost 60. He's going to lose some speed in his fingers. There's certain riffs that he'll go back to, because that's his safe place. But he's also got a few new things that hit on the pedal that makes him, get growly, get crazy, get whatever. I felt bad for Mike during the early part of the effects era, as I call it, 4.0, because a lot of what Trey and Page were doing were stepping all over the frequency of what Mike did with his synth stuff, who actually was the first person in the band, I would say, that really embraced using that sort of synth sound, Mike's synth bass, right? And like, he can't be the third person in on that. You can't have Trey like going, run, Page going, and then Mike's like,
what do I do?
I'll just go to the high register and like,
where's my drill?
Yeah, exactly. Poor Mike in the drill. He gets cut off too often. But this summer, I feel like they must have had some sort of a conversation or just realization, okay, we really took the effects thing to a certain point, and let's just try to find a way to intersperse or mix. And then you saw Mike's synthy bass stuff come back this summer, and I thought this was a really great summer for Mike's playing. And then of course Fishman,
Sure.
I mean, but like the wear and tear, like just as a drummer, I just have so much appreciation. I know he can do what he does because he does 3 to 5 hours of practicing every single day. And so he's my comparison is he's a marathon runner. He knows how to train his body. He knows how to like keep his body in shape. Like I remember seeing pictures years ago of the drummer from Wilco post show with ice bag, right? And I don't know what's that?
I said, and that's Wilco.
And that's Wilco, right?
Yeah.
And like, and then you got, Johnny B. Fishman up there, just absolutely. But he's really mastered. If you watch his technique, his arms barely move at all. He's just got perfect wrist control. Everything is set up in his kit so that he just has to kind of shrug his shoulders to move things around.
Yep.
Even his ride is like just there in reach. He's got so much to sort of play with. And yeah, he's the marathon runner.
He is. And that's a perfect way to put it, because, we all want these lengthy jams, right?
Yeah.
And if someone's never played drums or played any instrument, really, next time set a timer. Let's say we'll call a significant jam. We'll call it 15 minutes, right?
Sure.
Just sit in a chair, move your feet, and move your hands
for
15 minutes.
Yeah.
You don't even have to have a drum set. Just do this for 15 minutes. And you're gonna be like, holy shit, that was just one jam. So
I've been there recently, like the Awesome Sauce, we tend to take our songs long. That's who we are. And after 25 minutes, I actually start feeling these fingers go numb.
Yeah.
Because like I'm not as ergonomically organized as John Fishman. Like I'm in a corner of a basement, a little too hunched, a little too playing like this, right? You gotta kind of stretch, get the blood flow going back this way. It's a marvel to behold. And he just but also the thing about Fishman that still amazes me to this day is how he can steer the ship with just the subtlest change, like just the signal that he wants to keep going, and I'm gonna just steer it a little bit this way. And one of them, it doesn't matter who, all it takes is one of them to pick up where he's heading, and you end up with like the Alpine Ruby Waves.
Yep.
Like that. He completely, I don't think people realize how much things like the Alpine Ruby Waves happen because John Fishman isn't finished playing that song yet. And how pissed off he must be when he gets ripcorded. Like, dude, stick throwing.
Hitting Trey in the back of the head. Dude, and you touched on something that recently happened. You said Alpine. Well, hold on.
Not this year's Alpine. This is the Ruby Waves from
No. The point that I was going to make was about this year's Alpine.
Okay,
But I had another point. We were talking about Fishman with the steering. Where was I going with that?
Could be any member that picks it up.
Oh, yeah. So what I was going to say is with those monster jams like that, one of the things I like to do, you might do this too because you're a musician, I'll go through and like on my first couple of listens, I'll just actively listen or passively listen, so to speak. And then on the next run through, I'll be like, okay, I'm really going to dial in and listen to everything Trey's doing. And then the next time, I'm really going to dial in and listen to what Mike's and make the whole pass through every member. And if you do, it's harder to do with Fishman or with drums in general because it's not a note-based instrument. You're hearing. But if you do actively go through and just like, okay, I'm listening to Fishman right now. You hear those points that you were talking about. He steers the ship a lot more than what people think.
Yeah,
I
totally agree. And I think last year for everything that was going on, I still think Fishman gets the MVP for last year. 2021, he just gave them so much fire in the belly and so many different places.
He's so many different places, man.
Yeah,
he's the man.
Yeah, for
Second point before I forget it.
Yeah.
This year. Alpine Valley. I saw this on Twitter because I always look at the set list on Live Phish and I'm like, okay, check out the show. Like, what am I going to listen to? But I saw on Twitter someone made the connection to, and then it spread like wildfire of the not playing 1999 and then jamming out the Fluffhead.
Yeah.
And I was like, Holy shit, what a self-aware organism this
Mhm.
band is. Like,
Yeah.
or is it just pure coincidence?
I don't know, 'cause we got done the Toronto show, and all of a sudden I started seeing things on Twitter about, the Widespread, guitarist,
I saw that too.
and the whole, Down with Disease 20 years later.
That one's a little bit more of a stretch, though.
That's a stretch to me.
Yeah.
That because I was at that show, and I don't feel like I know somebody that actually got, this was actually really fascinating. You might find this interesting. So I think we all sort of speculate how much planning goes into set making and so on and so forth.
Sure.
My buddy was here from Prince Edward Island. That's a pretty big trip out. Prince Edward Island's like is our smallest Canadian province. It's out just off the shores of Nova Scotia. Okay. And anyway, his girlfriend got him the quote unquote paper set list from the stage. And so I actually got to see what the setup looked like of what they're taking out with them every night. I just assumed that it would have been on like the monitor that Trey has for lyrics.
Yeah.
It's an actual piece of paper.
So they do write out a set list?
It's not a set list.
Okay.
It's a list of possible songs.
Gotcha.
And there's about there was a column with about 20 on each side.
I like that better.
That they could have gone to. And it, like, for example, Pritchcore was on there but didn't get played, but got sound checked, right? But some of the stuff we did see was on there. And it was just really interesting because I like that a lot too, because that's the way that I used to do sets when I do an acoustic set. I just have my list and I kind of look down, I'd be like, where am I heading? What am I going? What am I doing? It's how they kind of, I know, probably avoid total repeats. I know there's been a lot of bitching about repeats this summer, but like a true back-to-back night repeat,
right?
For Trey to be able to kind of look down and go, okay, yeah, no, this is
this one. Yeah.
This is in the wheelhouse. But again, just, piece of paper, plain white paper, black font, 25 to 30 songs sitting there.
That's cool.
Pick and choose from that. And then there were a couple of things that they played that weren't even on that list. So I'll try to find the picture for you, because he sent me the picture and I was like, is that what I think it is? He's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what you think it is. I'm like,
see, that's fucking cool, because that's what I would expect from Phish. You have to have some structure to, like your point, make sure you're not playing Disease back to back or whatever song back to back. But like the thought of a orchestrated set list kind of would bum me out. It's like, okay, Ruby Waves, 35 minutes,
Yeah.
whatever.
No.
Yeah, that would bum me out.
It just, I don't think they can do that anymore.
No.
Anybody that watches the show would never be able to accuse them of that.
Absolutely. And the fact that they play stuff that's not on the list too, is also refreshing.
Yeah.
I love that, man.
Cool.
I know you mentioned you have band practice tonight.
Yeah, I do.
So I won't keep you too much longer. I usually try to keep these things at an hour, but we're about
the international edition has blown through the sound barrier.
Dude, I'm not kidding. Your stories are amazing. That's what this is about.
I feel like I'm just rambling on, that I'm talking too much.
No, dude,
total vanity project.
no, you wait until we get the feedback from this episode. This is It's really based around stories, your story, whoever the guest is story. Sure. And the questions are just kind of like pivoting points.
Yeah.
This is the show of tangents and I love it. But dude, Scotty, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time. And thank you for working me in. I know you had a busy day. Thank you for working me in, and thank you for going long. And have you ever, I know you mentioned the Phish festivals, but have you ever made the trip to Dick's?
No.
You haven't?
I've never gone to Dick's because it's, as a teacher, in Canada, our school starts right after Labor Day. And so it's just not tenable for me right now to do Dick's and then be any sort of functioning human being coming into the school year. I want desperately to go to Colorado in general. I've never been to Colorado either.
It's really nice.
So I would love to do that some year, maybe a retirement year. It's a lot closer than I'd like to admit. And if those guys can still keep doing it and just hold on for like 7 more years. Look for Scotty King, Dick's 2029.
He'll be there. Yeah.
I'll be there.
We can't have you showing up to the first day of school like Jack Black on the School of Rock, being like, I'm hungover. Who knows what that means?
I've gotten a few Jack Black comparisons in my lifetime. That's for sure. That's a nice halfway. But I do have something special planned for so I've got a milestone birthday coming up in 2023, and so everybody put good vibes out in the universe for an MSG 2023, because I've already gotten the clearance for I'm a December baby, so I've never done MSG.
Dude, I haven't either.
And so I've gotten official clearance from all parties involved for a Yem run in 2023. That's the dream. That's the goal. And then now I'm going to start Dick's 2029. I'm going to start on my wife almost immediately now. It's like, okay, so just so you know, we're going to Colorado. Yeah, the kids will be old enough. But to you, Clay, thank you so much as well. This kind of a podcast is a service to people like me, because it's been funny. Like I said, I've been on a few podcasts recently, but there's probably a lot of people like me that don't have a whole lot of Phish fans in their town, and probably a lot of people like me that are getting older that don't have as many people to talk to Phish about. And I find anyway, listening to your podcast, listening to other podcasts, it's like having somebody in the room that knows what you're talking about. And especially during the pandemic, that was such a good feeling. But I think people, even above and beyond what happened in the pandemic, this kind of a podcast can help so many people feel like they're not alone, that, you know, someone as crazy as them about, you know, the Riverport gin as anybody else. And so the fact that you're out here doing this and giving your time is really appreciated as well. So thank you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And it's fun. I mean, you touched on it. It's who doesn't like to sit around and talk about Phish for an hour? So thanks again for being on. And everybody, thanks for listening if you're still with us, and we'll be back next week.